I say we get started for respect of people's time.
All right, give me 1 second. I'm going to hit record.
Hi everyone. This is Vanessa Valentine, your local school council chair, where this is a special meeting for the principal evaluation training with LSC relations. I unfortunately don't have the agenda in front of me as I'm commuting from work to my destination. So I turn it over to the vice chair so he could facilitate the rest of the agenda while I get to my location.
Thank you, Vanessa, but I don't have the agenda in front of me, but I will call this meeting to order, and I would like to have a roll call. Okay, since I don't have the names here, I'm gonna go by Mr. Jaramillo.
Present. If you want, I can.
Yeah,
I can
please. Yeah,
put a copy on the screen if that helps.
yeah, please. Thank you.
Give me 1 second here.
Okay, Vanessa Valentin,
Present.
Jose Quiles present. Master Sergeant Davis,
Present.
Norma Lopez,
Present.
Louis Cos,
Present.
Ms. Russo,
Present.
Mr. De Jesus,
Present.
Ms. Hernandez,
Present.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Present.
Ms. Reyes,
Present.
Mr. Orozco, Dave Colon, Ms. Sanders. Okay, so we have a quorum. Mr. Sergeant,
Do we have Veronica on the line?
No, ma'am. She said she spoke to you earlier and said she would be here 5:30.
Oh, she did not speak with me earlier, so I did not know that.
Okay. So she called me and said she had a meeting. She won't be at the 5:30. So I flipped the agenda. As you look at the public participation, and then the last of it was next steps at the end after we speak with her. So she said her meeting is from 5:30. And she called me about 3 something and told me that she couldn't be at 5:30.
okay, so could we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
A second.
Open for discussion? No discussion? Close of discussion? Those in favor, roll call?
Mr. Harmil,
Yes.
Ms. Valentine,
Yes.
Mr. Keelis,
Yes.
Son Davis, yes. Ms. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Cost, yes. Ms. Russo,
Yes.
Mr. De Jesus,
Yes.
Ms. Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes,
Yes.
Mr. Roscoe is not here, and none of the students are here. 11 yes, no, motion passed, 5:07 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Since this is a special meeting, we don't need to present the minutes from the regular meeting. That would be presented in our next meeting. We move on to the items on this agenda that are going to be discussed today. Can I get that, Sergeant David, please?
So we had the opening chair remarks while we were having the meeting, the purpose of the meeting, and then public participation after that.
Okay, so let's open it to our chair.
Thank you guys again for this process and being available for this special meeting. I did want to say that I have gotten great feedback from teachers in the building. Teachers in the building want to be involved with this process. They are eager to work with the council. So I feel that we are getting everyone engaged in the process. So I am excited about that part of it. That we do have some teachers, a diverse group of teachers, right? New, older teachers that just want to help, come up with questions, and just know more about the process. What I learned as well was a great opportunity to talk to them about what is a console for some of the newer staff. Some didn't know what console was, their involvement, that they could participate. So I'm just very thankful to those teachers and staff members that have reached out and want to be part of this process. So I wanted to report that. Is my responsibility to report the feedback I get, and that is sort of the feedback that I got. As I mentioned in the last meeting, right, there's election coming up. So for those parents, community reps that could run, I encourage you to do so. It's an important time to continue to have a strong council. So if you have not or thought about running for local school council, I encourage you as your chair to do so, and involve other parents, right? Involve other people that may be interested in being part of this process. So that is all the feedback that I got from the last meeting. And I am eager to learn new things today and hope that every member is as well. So, another update too. Some of you guys saw, we did email the letter to Mr. Jaramillo that needed to be submitted by February 21st. I do apologize, Mr. Jaramillo. Initially sent it to the wrong email, but corrected that. So, just want to acknowledge to the council members, and for it's recorded in the minutes that we have submitted that letter, and as well was acknowledged by the network chief and LSC relations. So that's all the updates I got. If anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer, but that's all I have as a report at this time.
Okay. Did you get from LSC Relations our next steps?
So they will do the presentation and they would explain to us the next steps. So after the training, we should know how to move forward.
So that's at 5:30, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Okay. So meanwhile, is there anything else that we need to discuss?
Well, if anyone has any question of my report, I'm more than happy to try to answer any questions I can.
Okay. Then
I know when we start talking about next step, and so we can clear this up. And I think Ms. Russo, she's on there. So one of the things, and this part of the agenda. So one of the things we can talk about is if you have any ideas on how we can include teachers as part of the process. We can talk about that now. That way, when we have our next PPLC meeting, we can discuss that with them.
So I would love to hear feedback from you and Ms. Russo and Mr. De Jesus, right, at staff. As I stated in my report, there is a group of teachers that are eager to help and be part of this process. We come up with questions, criteria, right, that will be a great fit for the school. So I would love to connect some of those teachers with the leadership. I did ask them as well to reach out to you guys. You guys were their voice in the building. So I'm not sure if they have or haven't, but I would love to make the connection. And would love to hear from you guys, the teachers and the staff, how you envision the involvement and engagement of our staff. So any feedback, Russo, De Jesus, Master Sergeant?
Honestly, at this point, I would like to know what next steps are from LSC Relations before we start doing anything. I don't want to be put in a position where we have any missteps in terms of how we accumulate information, how we get information from the staff. I know that the PPLC is meeting regularly every 2 weeks, and so some information has come up from that. The most recent one was the 23rd, and it was everyone was invited to attend, so the entire staff was invited. So there is that. If we wanted to put together some kind of, and again, I'm guessing here because I don't know what's allowed and what's not, or what's appropriate and what's not. But if we wanted to put together some kind of committee or exploratory committee to discuss, I would be agreeable to that. I just want to make sure that we're doing everything by the book.
Thanks for that feedback, Ms. Russo. I think that's the same for all of us. I think the process is not much different than what we did when we went through the process from Mr. No to Mr. Jaramillo, right? I think the timing, right, may be a little different. I felt like we were put in a different situation at that point. But I agree with you. Let's hear what the process is right now from LSC, and then definitely create next steps that's inclusive of all the school community. Any other feedback, Master Sergeant or Mr. De Jesus?
I'm in agreement with what Ms. Russo just said. I mean, that makes more sense for me too, because we don't want to, have any missteps and then we have to delay process or whatever the case may be when it comes to LSC and all that.
Master Sergeant?
I'm agreeing. I would say that the steps are not. I don't think we're going to hear. Most of us going to hear anything new other than individuals never, done this process before. I do think it's important to just make sure we just consider what support and how we're going to make this transparent. I said no matter what LSC relations tell us, there's certain things we can do. We know those things we can do as it relates to is Ms. Russo stated about having maybe a small committee to support. But again, once we figure out those guidelines, after we speak to them, if there's anything, they can confirm or deny the things that we do know already. And so I just think it's important that individuals that are going to be assisted in the process, they know the perimeters of which they're assisting and what they can do.
So I'm curious, for those of council members that have been through this process a couple times, I would love to hear, like, while we gave Veronica time to come on, what have been some of the things that you've done in that process, just to see if we get any helpful ideas from it. So I'm referring to like Jose, Cassandra. I know you guys recently have gone through these processes. So any feedback on that?
Well, an experience of maybe hiring more than 6 principals. What we have done in the past is put a committee together. Then we select the committee. We hear from the teachers in that committee. And then when it's time to select the principal, then we have to select it. I mean, that committee is only like an advisory committee, recommendation committee, wherever you want to call it, because at the end, the ones that select the principal will be the council.
So are those committees only council members, or those committees could be anyone that's interested in participating in those committees from your experience?
from my experience, it could be anybody. I mean, because it's a separate committee from the council. I mean, in that committee, you have council members, but it's also people that are not members of the council.
So I'll put this question out there, and I think none of us are gonna probably not be able to decide or say right until we hear the training and what's what. But how does the council feel about creating a principal selection steering committee that is composed of staff, parents, even students, if we're able to recruit them?
Because I want the whole council to know. We could see the go through the training and everything, but at the end, it's recommendations that they're making. It's not telling us that we have to follow that. It's a recommendation.
I just think before you, I mean, yeah, committees. I don't like the word committee. I mean, maybe it's another term you can use, but I think the most important thing is to figure out what do you want those individuals to do. For instance, if you want them to write the job posting, what they look, or a description of what you think we need in a principal, what are our needs in the school, those things. So I think one of the big other things is before you even start running out and trying to make committees, you would say, okay, what will you use the individuals for? Because sometimes when you make these committees, as Mr. Keeler is saying, individuals can get confused in figuring out where they duty start and where it ends. So I think when you make these committees, you have to have an idea of what are you using them for? Are you using them to support in writing the post, doing the posting for the job? Are you doing them to say, okay, these are the issues we need to focus on in the school, the procedure and how we do the interviews. Do you want someone with high school experience, whatever, someone with experience in special education? And those are some of the things that maybe you can ask the committee or whatever you want to call the group to do. So you just have to make sure you outline those tasks that you ask them to do. So it's so easy for asking for support and advice that individuals think that they have to say so in the selection. And so you have to be careful when you invite individuals in.
Okay, yeah, no, you're right, Sergeant Davis. But what we usually have done is that we hear the teachers, we hear what is it that we're looking for in a person that's going to be selected, and then we kind of understand more of the need of the school when we hear some of the advice that some of these teachers could bring to the table. So that's why I said at the end, they could say, well, we want somebody that knows how to flip a hamburger, but that doesn't mean that that's the person we're going to hire. We will understand that, yes, we need somebody to flip the hamburger, but we have to see it, other qualities that we're looking for to make sure that our children or our students get the best of the best.
Yeah, so I think that's a discussion for all of us, right? And I want the council to give their feedback and give their opinions, right, for this process. This is not just a one or two people, right? Like what we want the role of these subcommittees, whatever you want to call them. I understand that word committee could mean so many things, but what I took, right, my responsibility from the feedback that I'm getting from those folks that are stepping up, they do have realistic fears, right? They do have great feedback, right? So some that I've talked about, I said, hey, maybe they could help us come up with questions, right? They may be able to help us even write down the job description, right? But I want this to be an inclusive process. So then those fears are kind of go away, right? And everyone feels part of the process and not left out, because a lot of people felt like they were going to be left out of the process. And I said, no, this is a process that you come to the meeting. I even said, join us in the trainings, right? Like, learn what we're learning. So then we're going through this process together. So this is just a discussion. We could go more into it once we get our training. But what are people thinking? What are your thoughts about that? Hi, Candido.
Ms. Hernandez got her hand up.
Thank you. The only thing I was gonna say is that I like the idea of, I want the teachers to feel that they're a part of this, right, of this whole process. And I'm just kind of thinking, in my head, maybe I don't know if that looks like if having a special LSC meeting to hear the teachers out, with their formed committees, and then maybe they draft a letter to the council, stating what that job description could look like, what qualifications are they looking for, where do they see the school, or what would they like to see the school in the next 4 years. Those are just a couple ideas that are just generally popping out of my head. And as well as parents, maybe creating an online survey, going through Facebook, through the school's website. Hey, we're in the process of this principal selection. We want you to be a part of this. Let us know, give us some feedback, and us as a council helping develop these questions through, Google form that we could just email out. That could be another way to do this. But again, I'm just one person. I don't know what else, what others think.
Anyone else has any other feedback? Thank you, Cassandra, for that feedback. I don't want to call people out, but anyone else, what have you been thinking from our last meeting, right, to now on how to move forward with this process, right? We know that everyone wants to be part of the process, right? So what are some ideas or things that you're hearing that make sense? So then when we go through our training, the discussion could be shortened by just having already ideas that are running through your head. So any other opinions on how to collect information from all stakeholders? So that silence, that means that we'll wait for Veronica to join us. I'm texting her and trying to see if she is joining right on time, because we are waiting for her to join us. So
I would say to my colleagues that I think everybody should speak up, because if they spoke up to have a new principal, it's good for them to speak out. What are they thinking? What were they thinking? They need to. They wanted to get some things done, and now we're quiet. We can't be quiet. This is a council that made a decision, and now we have to continue to work forward for our students. So I would say that, even if it's something small, everybody should say something.
So I want to reflect back on some of the stuff that was said. So Master Sergeant, you mentioned the work committee may not be the appropriate word for what we're trying to come up with. What will be, if it's not a committee, what is it? What would you call it if it's not a committee? A principal selection committee?
So we all have, advisories, or whatever you want to call them, because of different groups. I mean, we're doing it at the PPLC. So and if you want to also ask some of the other individuals, it relates to the principal. You got Mr. DeJesus that handles the ESPs. You have the PPLC handles the teachers. And then we just got to make sure we take care of all the other essential staff members and how we include those individuals, as well as parents. Now, you can also do a survey if you like to. A lot of this stuff don't have to be, formalized, but I think that we're meeting every 2 weeks to support the process. And one of the members brought out, we did skip public participation.
We'll definitely go to public participation. But I have a question because you just confused me a little bit, Master Sergeant. So the PPLC committee will be different than the other committees we're creating, right? So PPLC will collect some feedback, and then if we create other committees or advisory committees, they'll be separate from PPLC, or could it be a committee that involves members of PPLC, community, and stuff like that?
Definitely, what you have to look at is when, and then we see Ms. Jackson there, you have to look and see how often, when you're going to meet with those individuals as well, and when that information. So once we get Ms. Jackson in and trying to include all these individuals, getting the time hack, and I think the easiest thing to do is exactly what Ms. Hernandez said. Figure out what tasks we want those individuals to do. And a lot of this stuff can be done, through forms, emails, and things like that. And then they can enter some of our meetings.
I believe it should be one committee, one representation from whoever, because if we continue to make a whole bunch of different committees, we'll never finish this. So I think one person from PPLC, one person from the teacher. Well, we got 2 teachers reps. If there's an additional teacher that would like to participate, why not? We could hear them out. I don't think that there's a problem on that. I don't care what kind of training they give us. That would be up to us if we want to hear these teachers or we want to hear these parents. I think that if we want to be transparent, we have to open it that way. We have to open it in a way where everybody feels comfortable. And at the end, like I said, the council is the one that's going to make the choice and makes the vote. But we want to make the right choice and the right vote that would help our students.
With everyone's feedback. So we missed public participation. So Veronica, we're just opening really quick to public participation. And we are eager to hear from you and getting us started in this process. So any public participation?
No emails, ma'am.
Great. Thank you all that joined. I know we have many people joining us. Thank you so much for being here with us. And now I would love to present Veronica Jackson. She is our LSC facilitator and our trainer today to get us started with this principal selection process. Thank you, Veronica.
Do I have the floor, Madam Chair?
You have it. It's all yours.
All right. Good evening, all. Thank you all for having me. I am here to present you with the principal selection overview, which is one of the steps that is required before the LSC begin the principal selection process. So do I have access to share my screen? Okay. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And the LSC members will receive a copy of this deck after the training. And I noticed that you all had a very robust conversation about the process. And I will touch on some of those things, and then you all could ask me questions after that. So this principal selection process, and I do apologize. I just logged off of school. I was doing the same principal selection process with another school that is going into the principal selection process. So if I'm a little ragged and I missed some words, it's because I've been talking for the last hour and a half, saying the same thing. So the objective of this training, the training overview is to talk about the responsibilities, the LSC's responsibilities for the principal selection process, because the LSC is the one that will be doing this process. I will touch on some of the definitions and legal responsibilities that apply to the traditional school at Steinmetz. And then I will go over the steps. I will let you know the required steps and the optional steps. There are 11 steps that the Department of Principal Quality created so that the LSC can have a transparent process to give a contract to the next leader for the next 4 years. So, as a local school council of elected officials with this governance, your responsibility is to work with our office, and working with our office means that you will work with your specialist to keep you informed of the process and to provide you with the training overview. So the fact that I am here giving you this overview, you can say that you are actually working with our office. Now, as your specialist, I will only provide you with information. I do not tell you how to conduct your process, because this process is the LSC's. You will work with the Department of Principal Quality as the fact that you will present them with your vacancy advertisement. They will present you with your candidate slate of eligible candidates. And we also ask that you work with your network chief to get information that you do not have, so you can create the best practice for your principal selection process. And working closer with your chief, we recommend that you may have a discussion with the about the current status of the school, review the CIWP, and then so you can identify those skills and qualifications that you will put in your advertisement, because your network chief does approve your advertisement before it goes up on the website. You will create your advertisement. Principal Quality gives you a template with that information that is required to be in there, but you, as an LSC, can put the skills and the desired qualifications that you have and your preferred qualifications for the next leader of your school. You will decide on the principal process steps and the activities. You will review all the candidate information, decide if you're going to interview. School visits may not be available to LSCs right now because of the pandemic, the candidate form, and how you're going to do your reference checks. If you decide that you're going to do an addendum to the contract, you have to get the law department's approval, but it's a standard contract, and your candidate has to agree to the addendum. You must reach a consensus of 7 LSC members to vote in the favor of one candidate to award a contract to. All right, so let's talk about legal requirements. If your LSC voted to not renew the contract, the LSC has no later than 45 days from that principal's contract expiration date to select a new principal. So if the contract ends June 30th, you must be at least almost done or completed with your principal selection process by May 15th. That is in the code. Now, if you are within the almost in the middle, that's fine, but you should be done or almost done with a principal selection process by May 15th. You must vote on addendums, and you must have them approved. Of course, you must get 7 members to vote yes to award a contract to one candidate in an open meeting. If any teacher decides that they want to put their hat in for the principalship and they are eligible, they must abstain from voting on the renewal, which you all already did, and then they must resign following before the principal's selection process begins. Only those candidates who have met the CPS principal eligibility can be awarded a contract. So that means that anyone may apply to be a candidate for your school, but only those that when the Department of Principal Quality gives you the candidate slate that meets the eligibility process, those are the only ones that you can consider to award a contract to. So, legal requirements again, you are not one of the schools that do not have the authority to award a contract. At this time, Steinmetz does have the authority to award a contract to a principal. You are not an alternative or small school. Those are what we call appointed LSCs, and what they do is recommend candidates, and it's the board who makes the final decision on who to award the contract to. The district has a uniform principal performance contract, and if you add any additions to the standard contract, that must be negotiated, it must be voted on, it must be added to the contract before you vote to award the contract, and the candidate must agree after the law department approves the addendum. So the types of principals, a contract principal is retained for 4 years. And that contract principal coming in, they have the right to replace and hire new assistant principals when they receive their contract. If for any reason that the LSC cannot come to a consensus on who to award a contract to, an interim principal may be placed into the school, and they also have the authority to displace and hire their own assistant principal. An acting principal is someone that is placed in the school for only 100 school days. They do not leave their position, and when they are done, they go back to their previous position. They cannot displace an assistant principal. Administrators in charge are the retired principals that you usually see covering positions on a temporary basis at the discretion of the CEO until the LSC can contract a principal. Now, if you are in the position where you have an administrator in charge, the administrator in charge is not an LSC member. So let's talk about the steps. Are there any questions before I go to the steps? All right, let's talk about the steps. There are 11 steps that the Department of Principal Quality has set in place for conducting a principal search. And based on your conversation, that you will most likely do a full principal selection process. However, there are some steps that are required and some steps that are optional. Steps 1, required. Step 2, required. Step 3, required. Step 4, required. Step 10, required. Step 11 is a requirement. 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are optional. Okay, so we're going to start.
Veronica, could
Yes.
you repeat that again? The
Okay.
required. Tell me what is required.
Steps 1 is the notification and the organization of the selection process. That's where we're going to get into it in detail, okay? That's required. Step 2 is to draft and approve the principal position advertisement. That is required. Step 3 is the posting of the position advertisement. That is required. Step 4 is to review the resumes. That is required. Step 10 is to vote on a finalist to award the contract. That is required. 11, submit the signed contract to the Department of Principal Quality for presentation to the board. Now, interviews, second round interviews, candidate reference checks, school visits, and candidate forms are optional, but we highly recommend that LSCs do a full principal selection process. All right?
Got it.
So we're going to start with step 1, and after I do each step, I'll stop and ask if anyone has a question. Okay, so there's a notification of vacancy when a principal's contract is not renewed. If during the contract, if a principal leaves a position based on retirement, resignation, if they get a promotion, or if any other reason that they leave that particular school, that contract is broken, which in any case, the LSC must wait until notification from the Department of Principal Quality that the proper paperwork has been filled and that there's a vacancy. So yours is bullet 1. Your notification of vacancy became open when the LSC decided not to renew the current administration's contract. You're going to organize your selection process. You're going to assess the needs of the school. This may be when the LSC may want to meet with the network chief or the deputy chief to get the performance data of the school. That way you have the information you need when you create the advertisement for the necessary skills and qualifications that you want your future principal to possess to achieve the school's and student goals. Okay. You define the structure of the process. This is required before you begin the principal selection process. You're going to create your timeline. You're going to create and agree on the steps of this that you're going to go through for the principal selection process. If you're going to include a committee of non-LSC members, you must decide if there will be a committee with a vote, and then you must approve those committee members with a vote. This must be done before you begin your principal selection process. You're going to develop the steps. You're going to assign who's going to do those activities, who's going to conduct the interview, who's going to phone screen, who's going to schedule the interviews, who's going to be the moderator for the candidate forum, etc. You all need to do that before you begin your process. You're going to identify the roles for each step. And then you're going to follow the code of conduct agreement to ensure confidentiality and professionalism during this process. That means as an LSC and committee members who are non-LSC members must follow this code of agreement to make sure that the process is held to confidentiality. You cannot discuss with anyone who is a non-LSC member who is not on the committee until you get to the final step where you will introduce the candidates to the public at the candidate forum. Okay? Any questions on step 1?
Veronica, from your experience, some of these, we're calling an advisory committee. How many members have you seen other schools have in these type of committees, right? Because we're already a big group with LSC members, right?
Right.
What have you seen that has worked well in other schools?
That has worked well? Okay.
Well, nothing works well. Right? Yeah, let me say. But how many members per se?
So oftentimes when there's a need for transparency and that the LSC wants to bring in a committee that is advisory, okay, they usually pick one member from each stakeholder in the matrix. You know what I'm saying? One teacher, one non-teacher staff, one parent that is not an LSC member, one community member, and then they can use the students because the students don't vote, but they can be a committee, for advisory. You may use 2 of your student reps because you can use those as a committee that will meet and that will present their information to you based on each step for advisory. But most of my schools and most LSCs, in my experience, that they use the LSC as the committee. But that is strictly up to you all. If you all decide that you want to use a committee, my recommendation is to create a situation where you could interview the committee members to see if you know, which one you want to use to fill that position. Make sense?
It does make sense. Have you seen in this committee any other stakeholders, right? We're a sustainable school. We may have different partners, right? Helping us meet our goals. Have you seen in this committee include maybe community partners with the teachers and the parents and the student, or you see them not being part of this process at all?
I have not in my 7 to 8 years had where CBOs or community partners that LSCs use those. Oftentimes they use those members that either have been engaged with the LSC, who probably ran for an LSC seat and didn't get it, and could be a great asset to it. That's the only members that I have seen. I have not seen any of my LSCs even use any of the CBOs that partnership with the schools, because remember, these CBOs have partnerships that may not be a partnership with the new leadership. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want to make it whereas you have someone with an agenda. And I'm not going to say that your CBOs or your partnerships, there may be someone with an agenda, but you want to be mindful of that.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback.
When you interview them. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Step 2, the principal position advertisement. You're going to create your advertisement. You're going to draft and you're going to approve that. You're going to review all of the data. You're going to list those preferred criteria that you want in your leadership. And then you're going to vote to approve that agenda. As I previously stated, Department of Principal Quality has a template, and all you have to do is enter in the information that's specific to Steinmetz into that advertisement. And remember, let's go back. When you have a committee that meets, they must follow the OMA, just like the LSC. They must post agendas. That information is public. When they come together and they meet, they must take minutes, as well as the same way the LSC meets. They must meet before they bring whatever information they have to the LSC. So when you all create this committee, your committee members must know they must follow not only the confidentiality part of the process, but they must follow the OMA laws as well. Okay? So once you vote on this advertisement, which is required, you must submit the advertisement to the network chief. I always ask that you copy me on it so I can get the response of the chief. So when it's presented to the Department of Principal Quality, I can let the I can let the Department of Principal Quality know that you all have gone through the training overview and that you all voted on the advertisement. So it will not create a situation where your advertisement is not posted on your desired day. So it is posted for a minimum of 10 school days. And the Department of Principal Quality receives all of the applications, all of the resumes, all of the cover letters to the chairperson. And anyone that wants to apply must apply on the CPS website. Once you receive, the LSC chair receives a list of the candidates who applied, their eligibility status, and all of the materials that were submitted from the Department of Principal Quality. The LSC then can move to the next step, which is the resume review. Are there any questions on the advertisement? All right. The resume review is required. And when you review the resume, then you will identify which candidates that you're going to interview. Okay. So the LSC chair is the one that receives the candidate slate. And it will have a list of all the candidates that submitted their resume, their cover letters. It will say if they are eligible, and then it will let you know the certification that they have. The LSC will review all of the resumes and compare them to the position criteria. Then you're going to rank the resumes into the ones that meet all the requirements, the ones that may need a little further review, and those that do not meet, which will be those that are not eligible. You automatically know that those will go into pile 3. If there are some candidates that are pending and you want to look at those candidates as well, you can choose to interview them while they're in a pending state. But if they do not meet the eligibility requirement, you cannot give them a contract if they become a finalist. So if you're going to do a person that's pending, you may want to keep in contact with the Department of Principal Quality so you can know if their status changed. So if you're in the middle of maybe doing a second round interview and they fail eligibility, you can then take that person out of the running for a candidate because you cannot give them a contract. Okay. We recommend 3 to 5 candidates for the first round to interview. The reason why we recommend 3 to 5 because then you can deduce those as you go to the next round. Okay. Once you review the resumes in a closed session, you will vote in an open session of the candidates that will move on to the interview process. Now, remember, the candidates' names are still confidential because of state and federal laws. So you will vote on those candidates that will move to the interview process. So then any questions on step 4? I'm sorry. I don't want to rush you off. Okay, step 5, conduct interviews. The LSC will identify which LSC members or committee members who will participate in the interview, which questions each member will ask. Your questions cannot be biased. We recommend that you do not ask questions that will only require a yes and no answer. You will define the rating criteria for each question. What are you looking for in that rubric? What answers that they may give when you ask the questions from the panel of interviewers. I don't know if you're going to do this in person or if you're going to do this virtually. Interviews are closed sessions, and based on the OMA, they are recorded as well. Each candidate will get the same question. Each candidate has the same time for each question, and each interview must be timed. So if one candidate gets 30 minutes, the next candidate will have to get 30 minutes. So you have to decide the time for your interviews so that each candidate will get the same amount of time to answer each question. If you have 5 questions and you're going to say 5 minutes, each candidate gets 5 minutes to answer the question. You cannot ask discriminatory or illegal questions. You cannot ask someone of their religion, their ethnicity, even if you believe you know it, their sexual preference. If they let you know how they identify, that's fine. What their pronoun is, if they divulge that information, that's fine. But you cannot ask them what their pronoun is, and you cannot assume that, unless they let you know. Okay? You're going to schedule those days and times. So you will assign someone that will reach out to each candidate and schedule the interview on the days and times that you have scheduled for the interview. If you're going to interview each candidate a day, that's fine, but you will create that schedule and let them know what time their interview is. It's just like they're applying for a job. If they would go to someone in corporate and they tell them your interview is at 1:00, then their interview is at 1:00. So you all are in charge of this process. You run this process. After the interviews, you will debrief in a closed session, and you will debrief on who will advance to the next round. So if you had 5 interviewees, if you like all 5 of them, you can advance 5 to the next round. If you only like 3, you can advance 3. If you only like 2, you can advance the 2, so forth and so forth. Then you must let those candidates know if they moved on to the next round. Thank those that did not move to the next round. You could do it with an email or a telephone call, however you decide you want to do it. So, of course, as I stated, interviews are in a closed session. The committee, the LSC, should be taking notes. They should be rating as they go through the interview process. You can narrow that candidate pool to from 1 to 3, or you can advance all 5, as I previously stated. You must vote in an open session on the candidate that will move on to the next round of the principal selection process. If you decide, are there any questions on step 5? No. Step 6, you can decide if you're going to do a second round interview. Most LSCs that do second round interviews, they bring those candidates in, and they use that opportunity to get a presentation on the first 90 days of how they would come in and their plan for the first 90 or 100 days of their administration. And they present it to the LSC. You can decide however you want to do your step 6 interview. You can make these questions more school related to the culture of Steinmetz, what programs that they may bring into the school, if they write grants, or where they whatever it is that you want and you all desire as a criteria based on the feedback that you receive from your stakeholders. You can use this for the second round interview. Of course, second round interviews are also closed session interviews, and they must be recorded as well. If you interview, I highly recommend that you do reference checks. If you ask for 3 references, you call those references. You get the information from their former supervisors. You can also contact LSC members or LSCs if they are a candidate from a former school to get any references. You can, if you want to talk to a LSC chair from their previous school, you just reach out to me. I reach out to the LSC member or the LSC. You could visit an LSC meeting. If they agree that they will talk to you, then we'll make that exchange so they can let you know and give reference on the leadership of that particular candidate. The LSC resource guide have some information on how to conduct a reference and a form that you can use to conduct your references. Please conduct references before you make your final decision. Okay. And I'm saying that from experience, from a school who gives a contract, and then after that, they notice that the principal is not who they say they were. And I always ask, well, did you do a reference check? Reference checks always let you know about that particular candidate, and they say no. And I'm like, okay, you should never get to the final stage without doing a reference check. But that's my recommendation. Okay. As I said, school visits may not be an option, but if it is, you can work with your network chief and maybe have a school-based employee to go into those schools because, we have our vaccinations, our boosters, or whatever. And it may be easier for a school-based employee to go in to do a site visit and report back to the LSC. Any questions on step 8? All right, moving on to step 9, holding the candidate form. I always recommend, even if you are down to one candidate, that before you do a vote, that you can do a form so that you can introduce that particular candidate to your stakeholders, so they can engage with the candidate, so they can ask questions, so they could give feedback as a member of the audience. But however you determine the format, if you do a candidate form, I recommend that you have a plan for a candidate form. Give time where the candidate introduce themselves. You all have done this before, so you know how to do that. Prepare like 3 to 5 questions, standard questions, and remember, if the moderator asks a question, each candidate gets the same question. Each candidate gets the same time. And if you have time for questions from the audience, you can do that. But I highly recommend that you select someone who will field those questions to make sure that those questions do not violate any laws, or if they are not discriminatory. Someone has a question?
Yeah, it's
I
me.
can't see. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's me again. The candidate forum has to be at the school. It's usually conducted at the school, or if there's another venue, could it be there?
Okay. It doesn't have to be at the school. But remember, if you hold it in a location other than the school, the agenda has to be posted at the school, and you have to follow the OMA guidelines. It could be virtual. It could be any place that the LSC decides. But the place where you choose for the candidate forum, they have to be open and have to know that the public has the right to be at this candidate forum. So it has to be open to anyone that wants to.
Perfect. And I'm only asking that because you know how there's still restrictions. It's probably going to be hard, right? In CPS per se. So just for us to know that if we did find, right, a venue that it's open to the public, that we could potentially do it there and not hold back from not doing a forum.
Right. So if that is the case, I will recommend that, if there are restrictions in place of the total number of people that can be inside of the venue, create a virtual link as well, so they can log into that. So you cannot be accused of not giving the public access. So, does it make sense?
Awesome. Yes, a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. Step 10, the vote. You've done all the work. Interview, reference checks, maybe site visits, second round interview. Then after the forum, you go into a discussion in a closed session to make your final selection. Okay, you discuss the candidates and the traits from the interview, the school visits, the community forum, the feedback from the committee, feedback from the audience. if you're going to take that. So you're going to review all that, bring it together, discuss it amongst the LSC. And then we recommend doing a straw poll on the candidates, ranking them in order, with 1 being the top, 2 and 3, and how you will place your candidates. In an open session, then you will vote to award the contract with 7 yes votes for one candidate. You have to have 7 yes votes for one candidate. So if you go in the straw poll and you rank them and you find that you deadlock, you should continue to discuss, if possible, to get 7 yes votes for one candidate. Then in an open session, you will vote to award the contract to one candidate with 7 yes votes. After you vote to award the contract, if this is done in person, you can have the contracts available. Some schools do a signing day where they place the 5 contracts and the principal signs each contract. The chair signs each contract. The secretary signs each contract. And then everyone that voted yes signs page 8 of the certification page. Then that principal is responsible. Once you contract your principal, you're going to give them all these documents, or you're going to give them the original. And then they are responsible for presenting the contract to principal quality, to the network chief, to our office. The LSC will hold one for their record, and the newly contracted principal will have one for their record. Now, if you're going to scan and send the documents, you can scan and send the contract to the network chief, send a copy to myself. Once I look over it and it's correct, I will send it to principal quality. There are also guidance in place for those who do not feel comfortable coming in person to sign. There could be an attestation that we have used, that we have been using during the pandemic. So the Department of Principal Quality reviews. They make sure that there are no errors. Once it has been reviewed by the personnel in principal quality, the contract is presented to the board to be accepted and filed. Now, note that the board does not have final approval of your contract. The contract is accepted and filed so that it would say, it would be on record with the district and HR that there is a contracted principal at Steinmetz. If that contracted principal does not present that contract to principal quality, if they are outside the board or if they come from another school, they can't be staffed at your school and start on the day that you want them to until they present that contract to principal quality. Okay. Any questions on that? So I always say, step 11 is the step where you'll know if your principal can, 1, follow the directives of what they must do to present their contract. And then you will know what type of partnership that you would have with that principal. That's just my inside joke. The reason being is because a lot of principals do not follow the other steps of presenting their contract to principal quality. And then when they find out that they're not staffed at a school, they don't understand why. So it's very important for that principal, for the LSC, to let their new contracted principal know what they must do to get their contract filed and accepted with the board. All right. So what happens in the instance where you all do not get a consensus, and that's a consensus of 7 yes vote for one candidate? You have certain options. You can present those candidates ranked based on your vote, on the votes received. You all will vote to present a recommendation to the CEO. And you will complete a recommendation form listing your candidates in order of the candidates that you prefer. 1 being the top candidate, 3 being the lowest, the one who had the lowest vote. So the CEO may select one of those candidates. and offer them a contract. Or the CEO may decline and reach and send you all a letter and say that we decline or I decline to select a candidate, and that you must go back and begin the process, or you can continue to vote until you get 7 yes votes for one contract. I do apologize for that. I have dogs and they get excited when my children come home. So if the LSC does not submit this list to the CEO, or if the CEO declines, you may begin the principal selection process over, or you may, if you choose not to select one of the candidates on your recommendation, you can say we want to start over. You have that option. If you fail to submit the 3 candidates in order of preference, and or the CEO declines the recommendation, the CEO will appoint an interim at the school until the LSC is in a position to award one candidate with the contract. Are there any questions? Okay, if there aren't any questions, I will mute myself so you all can move on. Thank you for this time. I will put my information into the chat. Each LSC member has access to ask me any questions. And you all have a great evening. And
Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you so much. I am more than sure that we will be looking for guidance of LSC relations, just making sure, right, that we are following the process. I think it's a little bit more clear for us now. So, by hearing the presentation, Council, I think that a good next step, and one that I know we haven't really had her involve or be with us. I think that our next step is, if everyone is willing and able, and we talked about this, having a couple special meetings and all of that, is maybe hosting a special meeting with the network chief, right? Because as we saw the presentation, it indicated, right, to work with our network chief. And I think there's been some disconnect, right? I haven't seen her participate during this process. She's not with us tonight. So I recommend to the council that we call a special meeting with our network chief to discuss a timeline, even talk about the advertisement, and then create our timeline and our plan moving forward. So I would love to hear feedback from the council onto that recommendation.
I definitely agree, ma'am. And then I think in that same meeting, we can go into a closed session and talk more about the committees and whatever else we need.
Yeah, that would be the goal. But I was just saying that we do it with her, right? Just so that we'd include that in that process and then come up with a timeline.
Correct.
Any feedback?
I agree, Madam Chair. I think it's a good idea.
I do as well.
I agree.
I agree too.
Awesome. So I make a motion to call a special meeting, which this is going to be an interesting motion because I don't have a date till I reach out to her tomorrow. So any suggestion on how we present this motion, just present it as we will call a special meeting with our network chief to work on the timeline and process for this principal selection. Will that be Veronica? Clarification.
So my recommendation, since you all agreed, and it's just it's a vote that you all do, so you can have record that everyone agreed to call the special call meeting. Just say that everyone agreed for the special call meeting. You all can discuss some dates. Reach out to the chair, and then you can reach out to the LSC members with a written notice of the dates, and you all can agree on that, so you won't be stuck, with possibly not moving along with your timeline.
Great. So
because it's a procedural vote, not a required vote.
So we don't need to make a motion.
No, it's just that you all agree. Let's call a special call meeting. But since you don't have the date and you have to confirm with the network, just, once you get a date, just reach out to your LSC and say, are you all available on this date? Hopefully you all are available, and it will be, you all will not be voting on any matters. So it will be a meeting, and even if you don't have quorum, she can still do her presentation.
Perfect.
Right?
Perfect. So it's clear that Steinmetz Local School Council today agreed to meet on a special meeting with our network chief. Following this meeting, I will reach out to our network chief. I will then email all our council members with that proposed date. Master Sergeant that will post to meet all criteria for that special meeting. In that meeting, we will then meet with our chief and create our timeline for this principal selection. Can I get thumbs up at least, or the cool? Norma, Jose, that's a thumb up, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Is there any other comments or feedback based on our presentation?
No, I
Yes.
have a question for Ms. Veronica. A principal that has not been renewed the contract, would that principal be allowed to come back, put his resume or his candidacy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you for the question. Any other questions or comments? Great. So it seems like we got all the gist of what we need to do. Let me reach out to our, definitely our network chief. I do have a question, Veronica, for you. The subcommittees or the exploratory or the steering committee, whatever we want to call it, you did mention that they are subject to the OMA and also the confidentiality, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Okay, so I don't see any hands up. I don't see any additional comment. I will be reaching out to other council members with the proposed date from our network chief so we could create our timeline and then start this process. I'll keep reminding you guys, this is going to be special meetings probably quite a few times. We have till May 15, as you guys heard from the presentation. So we do have a tight schedule and we will be respectful of everyone's time. But just remember, we're all going to have to put in some extra effort in this process. So if there's no final questions, any final thoughts, I make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second.
Roll call, open for discussion, close discussion, roll call vote.
Mr. Armio,
Yes.
Ms. Valentine,
Yes.
Mr. Keelis,
Aye.
Sergeant Davis, yes. Ms. Lopez,
Yes.
Mr. Cross,
Yes.
Ms. Russo,
Yes.
Mr. De Jesus,
Yes.
Ms. Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Rodriguez,
Yes.
Ms. Reyes.
Yes.
The remaining members are not here. 11 yes, no no's, motion passed, 6:22 p.m.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thank you, Veronica, and everyone have a good night and be safe.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.